On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
The antidote to stepping out and doing something that takes courage is to just do it. I quit a full-time job with a big Fortune 500 company and started my first business. Suddenly I'm in an office, my pay is zero, no health care, it's terrifying. But doing it somehow was the antidote also. Just going out and doing it and being scared. I don't think I've ever been not scared. I think I've been terrified the whole time, ever since that one day. But, and some
that's open
source of motivation too. We were failing. We ran out of cash 3 times. This 3 years, we barely got paid anything. Then we pivoted. The last pivot, we grew from 0 to a $24 million run rate in 2 years.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, back to you here today. Another king on the stage, my brother Sanjit Singh. How we doing this morning?
Doing good. It's very early here.
Well, you and I both are here. We're committed, obviously, to our businesses. We're committed to each other at this point, and we're committed to this audience. So, Sanjit, what kind of business do you have, my man?
So I'm a fractional chief revenue officer, and I operate under the company name Boltt, B as in boy, O-L-T-T.
Love it. You and I are going to have an amazing conversation because we speak the common language of sales, revenue, growth, more, right?
More is
I love it. Yeah, more is better. And spoken like a true salesperson, growth solves everything. There's a lot of other things that go into that equation, but I assume that that's probably a similar belief that you hold, is that growth solves everything. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it solves a lot of problems, and it creates some problems, but then
It does.
Those are much easier to solve, I think.
I think that I would agree with that, but I think every salesperson would also agree with that. And so maybe we'll convince some of the non-sales background people here today that growth is their problem. But Sanjit, tell us just a smidge about, obviously you said sales fractional leadership, but tell us just a little bit about what you do, what kind of clients do you serve, and then we'll get rolling into your story.
Yeah, so fractional sales leadership is simply about serving multiple companies that may not need a full-time chief revenue officer, may not be able to afford a full-time chief revenue officer.
Yeah.
And so the kind of clients I have are usually, they're obviously, of course, B2B, which is what sales is. And they are typically 0 to 25 million. I've had clients as big as 70 million, but usually my sweet spot is 0 to 25 million.
Yeah, I love that. They are in growth mode, but need a little help with that growth.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's awesome. You've got a background or your story. I know it comes from the tech world, although maybe you may not be like the traditional tech founder. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wasn't in tech. And then in 2013, I started my first tech company. And it sounds so funny when I say it, like people would ask me, how'd you get into tech? And I said, I got into tech by starting a tech company, it sounds insane, but that's exactly what happened. Through a series of, meeting people and an intention and a desire to get into the tech industry and pivot into that, I went for it. Yeah.
Yeah, this desire that you're talking about, it leads me right into my first question, which is, it's always the why. Like, why are you doing this? The greater desire, the deeper desire, rather. What was that desire to be in the tech industry, or is there something below that? Like, what makes you tick?
Yeah, I got obsessed with this idea of finding leverage any way I could, because I didn't really fancy myself a high-powered player,
Okay.
And so the first thing I did was I got an MBA because I wanted the knowledge, but I also wanted the network. Network is leverage. And I really loved what I saw in the tech industry about the amount of leverage people were able to create in a fairly short period of time. even though I don't have a technical background at all, it's all sales and some marketing and some operations experience. And I didn't really know this at the time, but sales and my kind of background is sorely needed in the tech industry because most tech founders, even if there's more than one, typically don't have any background other than purely knowing how to code. Some
Yeah.
do, of course, but
Sure.
the vast majority that I run across, don't. And so this is one of the major things that hurts them later.
Yeah, and I would transcend that into most industries because tech was just the place that you got to see, and you've been able to pull the veil back and be able to see how true that is. The vein of sales, and I think this is where we're going to have just an awesome conversation. The vein of sales, or the beat of what it means to grow a revenue line is really absent from a lot of companies. And so I think that most companies listening today go, yeah, I would love more sales. And they probably don't consider themselves knowledgeable when it comes to sales or sales process or how to build a sales team or how to lead a team, whatever. So I think that you're spot on, and you've chosen the tech industry, and what a great spot for leverage. I want to press into that word though. What is leverage to you? What does it mean?
To me, leverage is about I take a step and the results are 10 steps. Really. I mean, it's just being able to get a lot more output for the same input, same amount of effort. But
Yeah.
kind of what you do, obviously, is what creates the leverage.
Yeah. Now, how can, I mean, obviously in tech, we're talking about, software and usage, and that's their leverage.
Right.
For you as a fractional sales leader, helping a company like this who is, really good on the tech side, but needing, sales help, what's the leverage in what you do?
That's a great question. Yeah. The leverage in what I do is taking a close look at their business and finding the levers that really drive sales for that particular company in that particular industry. Sometimes it's even taking a look at their process, their materials, even, how they're getting leads, how they're screening or qualifying leads. And
Yeah.
very quickly, usually what I find is one major area of weakness or I like to think of it as a bottleneck. So I'm
Yep.
finding bottlenecks, and usually, I mean, if everything else is working and you find one bottleneck and you open up that bottleneck, you've just created a tremendous amount of leverage because their whole sales output is being governed by that one bottleneck. Now, in the real world, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So usually there's multiple bottlenecks, but usually there is one major bottleneck that is causing the most issues.
Yeah. And the leverage to kind of, further that down the road is that they don't see it. They can't see it. And hiring someone with your expertise, that's the leverage, is that I get to bring in your experience, your history, because in the sales world of their business, you can look at it and go within 5 seconds. It's that old story of, you call in the plumber and he was only there for 5 minutes, but charges you $4,000 or whatever the number is. It's like, well, wait a second, you're only here for 5 minutes. It's like, yeah, but you didn't know what lever to pull.
Exactly.
I did. And that was 30 years of experience.
Yeah. In my case, it is 30 years of experience. And, I think that's the power of fractional in general, because this is a fast growing field. There's fractional HR leaders, fractional CFOs. And I think it's exactly what you're saying is we can get so much more done. Like if I think of myself as an early sales rep, if you had hired me full time, I'd be running in circles doing, not necessarily all the right things and getting basically low leverage, low output. And so that's the beauty of a fractional is, typically they are highly experienced people that you're going to get a lot out of the time that you buy from them.
Yeah, absolutely. The leverage here that we've talked about is huge. Yeah. And I think we can agree on being able to look into something quickly. What, like this 30 years of experience that you have, especially now in the tech space, but I bet you this answer that you're going to give me is relatable to all businesses listening. But 9 out of 10 times, or maybe at least 6 out of 10 times, when you look at a business, what is that main bottleneck? What's the main category that, of course, you go into depth and you help them release it, but oftentimes, what is that main bottleneck?
The most common bottleneck is they're not thinking about sales like an assembly line. Let me explain. So to me, a sale is like, You think about bottles going down this assembly line, you like 1,000 of them. And,
Right.
the key is what happens to each bottle, and is it, what are we doing to move that bottle down the assembly line as fast as possible? And what's the experience of each bottle? And does each bottle come out funny looking, or does it come out uniform? You know what I mean? So like
The same. Yep.
when the leads come in, how do they come in? How fast do we get to them? You know, if you don't get to a lead in like an online lead, at least in our industry, if you don't get to it within 5 minutes, your chances of closing that lead go down dramatically.
Oh yeah.
And so
Yeah, like hundreds of percents.
yeah, absolutely. And so, things like that are really important. And what is their experience on your website if they're coming in through your website? What are the questions that they typically have? What's the buyer journey? Like they typically need to know this, then they need to know this, then they need to do this. And then, then they need to see a testimonial, then they typically talk to their boss and then they buy, or whatever the journey is. And so
Yep.
is your process, whether it's on the phone or online or whatever your process is, does it understand that and walk through it? And do you know what the different buyer personas are? Do you know how to quickly get rid of leads that are not going to buy? Do you know what those look like, what they sound like, and how to get rid of them quickly? Because you're trying to separate the wheat from the chaff as fast as you can and spend all your time on the wheat, right? And then you need to harvest the wheat as quickly as possible. So what's your average sales cycle? Is it 30 days? Is it 90 days? Is it a year and a half for enterprise software? You know what I mean? So you need to know those things. And you need to know how many people are on the buyer, team. In most cases, in a lot of industries, it's more than one person. Sometimes it's as many as 5, 6, 10 people. And are you talking to as many of those people as you can, and answering their concerns and understanding what each of them wants and addressing it, and then who's our competition, right? So thinking about it like an assembly line like that, and what are all the things, do I have a checklist? Am I going through the checklist and am I getting through it as quickly as possible? And then how do I automate some of these things, right? Because why do something manual? The second you can automate it. That's leverage right there.
That's right. Yeah, I think that the assembly line phrase, I've never used that language, but it's absolutely right. Process, you hear sales process quite a bit, which is an assembly line is a process. It's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's never step 1, step 4, step 7, step 2. But tell me if you have found this to be true in the tech space, because a lot of companies that I've seen worked for in the past and then also now work with, their sales process is, well, first off, if they even have steps, a lot of times it's step 1, step 7, step 3, So there's this like fluidity that people feel like it's like, oh, it's sales. Like, I don't want to be robotic. I don't want to be an assembly line. I want to help people. Yeah. How do we combat this? Like, no, it has to be streamlined. It has to be the same. It has to be repeatable in order to grow revenue. Yeah. But yet at the same time, inside of that, we're creating an actual like human journey for them.
No, that's great. That's a great point. I mean, sales is a deeply human thing. Marketing is sales at scale, and it's not as human. They can't. You're dealing with such enormous scale. You can't possibly, deal with the human side as much as a salesperson, which is generally a one-to-one experience. But I think what you're saying is true. It's that there is a balance between the two. I mean, sometimes you do have to go step 1 and then step 7. But like you said, if your goal is to grow, like the podcast is about 6, 7, 8 figure, business, you have to think about scalability and you have to shoot for that. And obviously we can't always get there perfectly and every business is different. But I think the goal is, can I make this business more scalable and how do I do that? And like you said, to the extent you can, streamline and put things in a certain general sequence, knowing that, okay, in 5% of the cases, it's step 1, then 7, and then you go back to 2, 3, 4. Okay, at least you understand that. And things, for me, scalability has to do with automation, provides scalability, obviously. Then you have things like a very defined process makes it more scalable. Sales training materials, like a video library of actual sales calls that were unsuccessful and then ones that were successful. And so when you hire people, same thing. It's like bottles going down an assembly line. Can you train and onboard every employee quickly. And I'm of course talking about salespeople, but all employees. I've hired, people in customer success, and I've hired all sorts of departments. But of course, most of my experience with salespeople, but I found that to the extent you understand what a new employee needs to be successful,
Yeah.
you create those materials and you onboard quickly. You don't want to be having to spend, as a CEO, let's say, you don't want to spend, 17 hours of your time onboarding somebody if you don't have to.
Yeah, you're 100% right on the duplication, right? Because you cannot scale. Scale is duplication, and you can't duplicate if you have to be in everything. So all the examples that you gave, I hope that they were paying attention. You gave some really good examples there of scalability and how to do that inside of the sales process. I think that was a really good couple of minutes there. I want to ask you, kind of moving forward here, just a really good decision that you've made in your business. Of course, you've worked with a lot of other businesses, and so maybe you can pull some experience there as well. But inside of Boltt, what was just one good decision that you made that was just like, man, when I did that, a lot of other things came into place for me?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think because I already knew how to do the work. I couldn't go to a client and I could do the work with my eyes closed, sort of. And so I think for me, the trickiest part of growing a business like this is it's been a fun challenge because it's a hard business to build, because you can't use some of the normal techniques you normally could. It's a very high trust sale. And so for me, the best decision I made was to get to know, for example, start mentoring at incubators, getting to know other fractionals, because that's my lead source, right? That's my source of growth. So I think the decision to do that, which actually didn't stem from wanting to grow my business, it stemmed from, wanting to help entrepreneurs. And that's one of the things that really drives me in my work and the mentoring that I do, is just seeing, these new entrepreneurs who are super smart, but they don't believe they can, some of them really struggle with their belief that they can do this. And then they talk to me and they're like, oh, well, if this guy can do it, anybody can do it. This guy doesn't know the difference between this programming language and this programming language,
Right.
And so, a lot of times it's me just telling them, some real simple things that they probably already know, but it just, gives them confidence that they can step out and do the next thing.
Yeah, what you're talking about actually here is such an important principle, and it's not just you having it for yourself and believing that you could go do it for yourself, but you get to transfer that courage to others. We're even doing it right now. And so what do you feel like, okay, we said a lot of new entrepreneurs. Look, every entrepreneur listening right now has felt at that place where it's like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. And maybe that was a small little piece. Maybe that was a sales process. Maybe that was building a team. Maybe that was the next level of revenue that they were trying to get to. I don't know, but we've all felt that. What do you think? I mean, you kind of answered the question there as far as like, you giving them maybe pieces of knowledge or even showing them that, even though you don't know certain things, but what's the antidote? Like, what's the medicine to, I don't know if I can do this, especially with the people that you're working with?
Well, I think, as simple as it sounds, I mean, I think podcasts like this are a great start, because you're listening to, 100 entrepreneurs. I don't even know how many 100 you've had on, but who, we've all, run into brick walls and, shot ourselves in the foot and kicked ourselves in the butt and, walked off cliffs. I mean, we've all done such a tremendous number of idiotic things. I mean, we'll get into it, I'm sure, with me, but that, you realize, hey, these are just human beings just like me. And they're really not any smarter than I am. Being in sales, I've learned to sound, 10% smarter than I am. But I'm just as dumb or just as smart as anybody out there. And I would think that the rest of your guests would probably say the same thing.
Yeah, it is really true. So I want to hit that home for the listener, because it's funny because you have this feeling that like they're better than me, to your point, right? Or they must have something, they must know something, they must, have a special talent. And we all have, unique talents. But when you listen to enough people, to your point, whether it's here on the show or other podcasts or a conference, or you have a mastermind group that you go to locally or something like Gathering the Kings, it's like all that recognition that like, oh, he puts on his pants like I do. And he struggled last week with the idea of burnout, or he's frustrated because he can't find a sales leader, or whatever the problem is, it's like, oh, okay, got it. I can do this for whatever reason. I don't know what that translation is. It's like your problem equals I'm now okay. It's
No,
belief.
yeah, and I think the other antidote that comes to mind is it's even more of a it's almost a non-insight, but it's kind of like the antidote to stepping out and doing something that takes courage is to just do it. I mean, I think people feel like, well, I have to do it with gusto and no fear in my heart. And I think
Right.
that's the furthest thing from reality. I mean, I was scared when I quit a full-time job with a big Fortune 500 company and started my first business. Suddenly I'm in an office, my pay is zero, no health care, all this stuff. I mean, it's terrifying. But doing it somehow was the antidote also. Just going out
Yeah.
and doing it and being scared. I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever been not scared. I think I've been terrified the whole time, ever since that one day. But, you know, and
That's
some
open.
source of motivation too.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that, because I think that there's a wrap up in a lot of people's mind of they've got it all together, right? And here we are, we're talking about strategy and sales and, belief. But the real is that this morning when we both woke up, there was a voice that said, go back to sleep, don't do it, you can't, or you're not good enough, like whatever those things are. And really, for the listeners, that Son and I have just over the course of time quieted that voice. That's all. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means that we've gotten better at whooping him in the face. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people meet me and they're like, oh, you're in sales, you're this extrovert. And I think it's a continuum of extrovert to introvert. I'm significantly more introverted than people think. And, I'm even being on this podcast is scary for me, but I do it and hope for the best.
Hey, kings and queens, Chaz Wolfe. I want to talk to you about something that's super important to me. We put a lot of time and effort, we meaning myself and my team, into this podcast, into the content that goes out every single day. And if you have been getting any sort of value or insight from this, we want it to be able to reach other business owners too. So we would love if you would like, comment, share, leave a review, post, share again, all of the things on social media, on all the different platforms, or even on the podcast mediums of Apple and Spotify. We would love to be able to get our content into more hands, more entrepreneurs, so they can grow their business as quick as possible. Together, we are building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are committed to growing their businesses to new heights. So let's do this. Let's help each other. Let's help each other grow.
Yeah. When you said a couple minutes ago, you said walking off ledges, and I thought, well, yeah, sometimes I've done that willingly. Sometimes I didn't know.
Right.
And, okay, if we're putting that into like this belief factor and I'm going to go cliff jumping, like I'm going to purposely jump off this thing because I know that it's awesome and it's going to be great when I get there. But like, man, I'm terrified right now. To your point, the medicine is just jump. And that doesn't mean when you jump that you're not like shaking and wondering and your heart, stays up on the top of the cliff and you jump, your body jumped, and you feel the difference between your heart staying up here and your body jumping.
Yeah.
But eventually it's like the feeling of falling and the feeling of like, wow, this is amazing. And then you hit the water and then it's like, oh, I want to do it again. Or whatever extreme example that we want to give, but it's action. It's going, you know what? I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, and that doesn't mean going in, without any plan. I mean,
That's right.
I had a serious plan when of course we made a lot of changes to that plan. The plan was great, but I had I had a lot of reasons to believe that I would be successful, and so it's not just about jumping off a cliff, but some people will study and make a plan and forever and never jump. So it's a combination of the two. It really is.
Yeah, I believe in that. Let's flip the coin for you here. Let's talk about one of those bad decisions, the not great hours. You've already been pretty open with us. Tell us what that hour looked like.
A bad decision, man. It's like, which one? I have a lot of respect for my former business partner that I did my first start with, and we are still friendly and we have an amicable relationship. However, I don't think it was a good fit from day one. And I just wish I had listened to my intuition. And as we we were failing. We ran out of cash 3 times. This 3 years, we barely got paid anything. Then we pivoted. The last pivot, we grew from 0 to 24 million to a $24 million run rate in 2 years. So
Wow.
it was absolute chaos that 2 years. And so when you're going in the trenches at that kind of pace, and during that same time, during the time that we did the 3 pivots and then we grew, we raised close to $20 million in mostly venture capital money, and of course angel money
Wow.
before that. But to raise all that money, we went on the road together to do that, to build that kind of business, to fail like that. I mean, you're going through so much. You're literally building a house and living in a house with this one person. Of course,
Yep.
by the end of the 2-year period, we had 65 employees, but you're still, living in a house with that person. And,
Yeah.
it better be a good relationship. And it wasn't. And, what ended up happening was I got pushed out of the business. But the good news is I was able to sell out and made a good exit. But it was painful. It was very painful to get pushed out of your own company. And I've seen it happen to a lot of people, and it sucks,
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a famous story of Jobs having that happen, right? But the reality is still the same, is that for some reason along the way, there wasn't alignment. What do you think, looking back on that? Because there's probably a lot of people listening right now that either are in a partnership, they're considering a partnership. We've had guests on the show swear by partnerships. Others be like, never, ever, 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 ever. Obviously, there's 2 sides of the story to every story. But for you, going back and if you had to do it again and you were going to do the same exact partnership, would it be clearer communication? Would it be better expectation? What would have been the solution to that?
I just think it was a bad fit. But of course, there is a lot of things I could have done better. There's no question. I think I could have been much better at, like you said, communication. I think there's something that underlies a lot of this stuff, which I don't know if it gets talked about a lot, which is, emotional regulation. I mean, we come into this business, I can only speak for myself, but I've met a lot of fellow entrepreneurs that, a lot of us have ADD. A lot of us are very poorly regulated emotionally. Yeah. And that's something I've had to learn is, I can't run around and build a successful business being completely emotionally dysregulated and not being in touch with what I'm feeling, how to process those feelings. And instead I'm running around on total fear and operating on fear. And that doesn't always lead to the best decisions or the best communication, or even if I said the right thing. Like, I think there's a lot of times I said the wrong thing, but even when I said the right thing, I don't know if I always said it with how I wanted it to come across, because, I was stressed and dysregulated. And, it is a very stressful thing, but you got to find ways to ground yourself. And sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's, other things.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to take this opportunity to just take 30 seconds and hit on this, because it's actually 2 parts. Why people, entrepreneurs, join Gathering the Kings on the peer-to-peer mastermind side, even though they might be a big business owner, 7, 8, 9-figure business owner. The reality of it is what you're saying is that he's alone or she's alone. And what does that mean? It means that I'm over here by myself, unregulated with how I think, how I feel. I'm by myself in a silo. And because I don't have other people around me that are also high quality and can help agitate my thought on how to solve problems, then that leads me to bad decisions, basically, right? And so what San's saying is, like, you need emotional regulation, you need thought regulation, you need just some encouragement sometimes, you need some swift kick in the butt sometimes. And you cannot have that if you do not have a group of people around you, period. That's why they, the cliche, your network is your net worth, right? And so even inside of that, once you solve the isolation problem and you have people around you, what you're talking about is like, now we got to get precise on how do you regulate yourself. First off, how do you control your thoughts? Are you feeding your subconscious mind in a proper way? What do you do as far as like understanding your ability to connect emotionally? Like, there are people, we use a culture index, there are people who are high logic, and it is very difficult for them to feel anything. And then there are people who are very low logic or high empathy, and it is very difficult for them to think first, and they feel everything first, which, okay, you got 2 sides of the story here, and both can be, like you said, unregulated, and they need to understand how to operate in situations, whether it be with their employees, whether it be with themselves and their wife and their family or whatever. so that, these situations don't happen. Better communication, partnerships, employee relationships, like all of these things matter based on this individual that you're talking about, the entrepreneur, A, getting around people, and then B, starting to work on thyself. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I think mastermind groups are terrific. I've been a part of them in the past. I'm still part of them, different forms of them. And I think
Sure.
I think I'm a huge proponent of that. Yeah, for all the reasons that you said.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So let's talk about outside of the business. I'm a big fan of obsession, the word obsession. I completely disagree with the word balance. And so from your perspective and your 30 years of experience, like you said, how have you gone about obsessing in those other areas of life? There's other dimensions. There's family, of course, your health, the physical, emotional, there's lifestyle, there's all these other areas of life. How do you go all in on those things at the same time of obsessing with your business?
Man, that's a great question. I've done a terrible job, with a lot of those things, and I've been way out of balance.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm still learning, but I think whatever you want to call it, obsession for each of those things or balance, however you want to call it, I think everyone has to find their way of approaching it. I think it's different for everybody, but
Yeah.
I think that you can't ignore any of them, and you
That's
just
right.
have to figure out like when I was building my business, the one I've been talking about, no matter what happened, I was home for dinner and no devices. My spouse and I ate dinner together, and then we walked the dogs together, and we talked, and that was there was no compromising on that.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I was out of town, or of course, where I had a
Sure.
business, but absent anything really that I couldn't get out of, that was sort of something I did every time.
Yeah. I love that example. It's simple but profound. I love the one word that you said. I guess it's a compound word. It's a no compromise or a non-compromisable thing that you guys agreed on. You came into an agreement with your spouse and you weren't going to let that agreement go. You took it very seriously. And I think that what
Yeah.
you just described is what equates to obsession. If I'm going to obsess in my business, well, we know what that means. I'm up early, I'm up late, I'm working on my sales, I'm building my process, I'm hiring a guy like San to help me with that, or maybe I'm working on marketing, I'm in the operations, I'm building teams, whatever it is I'm doing. But then what about the rest? It's like, how do I go at it with the same intensity? Or in your case, the same, no, I'm not compromising here. It's discipline. It's like, no, I made a choice. I've come into an agreement with my spouse. I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
And I think you gave a great example.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the results of that have been for you guys? Because, I mean, obviously, the multiple companies now, and, what's been the result of like, no, this is important to us?
I think that was a successful formula for me at the time. Unfortunately, my marriage didn't last. I don't think the business certainly didn't cause it, but it didn't help. And I think it's very hard on people. I think businesses can be very hard on people. That's why I think what you're saying is so important.
Yeah.
And certainly, we didn't split up during the business. I think there was things like this that were important for us.
Absolutely.
But, and I think there's other ways to find balance. Like, there was a lot of times where it's like we have to sit down and talk about this thing with me and my partner. And instead of doing it in our office, we would walk around the block or walk in the park and talk about it.
Yeah.
So we were always finding ways to get exercise. There was a time when I read this book by this guy who was at Facebook and he burned out and I think he had a nervous breakdown, is what he said.
Wow.
And so he took some time off and did some reflection and then he started doing things like playing Frisbee in the park with friends. And he found that there was something about introducing play into his daily routine that was incredibly rejuvenating for him. It fed him in some way.
Yeah.
And so I read this book and I was inspired. So I came to the office and somebody said, "Hey, I want to talk about something." We were in an incubator. And so I said, "Hey, there's a ping pong table over there. Let's hit the ping pong back and forth and have this meeting." And so that turned into a ritual every day where all of us at 3:00 would go and play ping pong. And, we just round robin style. And it turned into like a really fun thing that we all look forward to. The whole day we're waiting for ping pong, we're working, but we're waiting for ping pong. So it was, it built a lot of team spirit and, it was a wonderful thing in it. And introducing play into my daily routine's always been a great thing.
Yeah, those are great examples of actually multiple things. The team building is just a piece of it, but the allowing obsession to be outside of just the task at hand, right? Going at things hard in all ways. I like to say work hard, play hard. And sometimes we're playing and working at the same time. That's integration, really. Rather than balance, it's like it's work-life obsession or work-life integration.
Yeah.
So I got one last question here for you, San. You've got, like you said, decades of experience. If you had the chance to whisper in the younger San's ear, what would you tell that guy?
I think I would tell him about this idea of leverage. You know, not that my younger self wouldn't know that, but give examples and really talk about how to find how to be able to do things faster, how to get there faster, how to spend less time, wasted doing other things that don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't understand the depth of what leverage could actually mean for him, right?
Yeah, or how to use it. What are some ways I could do that?
Yeah. There's probably a lot of listeners that have heard the word leverage. Okay, greater output for less input. But then they're like what you're saying. How do I do that? And an easy way would be to get with San and look at your sales process now, right? But in all seriousness, there's pieces of your business, there's pieces of your life, really. What we're talking about is optimizing. We're talking about peering into a dimension of your life. I mentioned several of them earlier and going, okay, what's a bottleneck that I can remove that just instantly gives me leverage? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think leverage. Okay, so to give a little bit more texture to that, if you're and I don't know that I certainly didn't do this, and I don't know how many of your listeners do it. Is as you're trying things, and I'm one of the things I am glad that I have become is a kind of a wild experimenter, and if I see an opportunity, I will try it. If I see an opportunity to gain leverage or get better results, I'll try some pretty crazy things, and
Yeah.
and but I think as you're doing things, to stop every few weeks and just sit down with yourself or a partner or an accountability team, like your circles, king circles, is like to say, is this working or not? And if it's not, like if I'm trying three things and two aren't working, get rid of them, double down on the thing that's working, and put a couple more experiments in the hopper. And don't be afraid to experiment. And if something isn't working, I think I wasted a lot of time feeling bad about it. What's there to feel bad about? Just get rid of it and try something else. I mean, what's the big deal? It's not a failure. It's just it didn't work. Let's move on. If a business fails, try another business. It's why sit around and beat yourself up? There's no point in that.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Basically, you've got this list of all the things that could be successful, and you're just crossing them off. That one wasn't. That one wasn't. That one wasn't. No big deal. You don't have to go back to it. That's the good part. You've eliminated it from the list.
Yeah, that's right.
And guys like you and I just have made it further down that list.
Yeah.
We've just crossed more things off, right?
Yeah, and because if you don't know what creates leverage, you got to try things. And like for me, I'd heard my whole life, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I'm like, great. That's wonderful for people who grew up with their neighbors are all Fortune 500 CEOs. Good for them.
Right.
What am I going to do? And going to business school was one of many ways that I was able to tap into a network that was more powerful. Maybe you save your pennies and join a club or something, or a golf club, whatever. But finding ways to get around people who are going to be able to help you, genuinely help you get to where you want to get to. Any way you can do that is one possible way of leverage.
Yeah, I love that. Great descriptions there. Super practical insight. San, how can the listener find you? Number one, if they're in the tech space and they are looking to grow their business and they need a sales leader to help them do that, how can they find you? Also, if they're just an entrepreneur and they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Sure. They can go to my website, Boltt, B as in boy, OLTT.io, and contact me there.
Perfect. Yeah, actually, it's a great website. I was there earlier this morning, giving a refresh to myself. But you've done things well. You've given us really practical stuff here. I don't want the listener to think that just because, like you said, maybe your experience comes from a fractional place. That man, there's a lot of like really key pieces of information that they could go apply today, actually. So I thank you for that. We appreciate you being here on the show, giving of that 30-year experience. And I wish nothing but success and the best for you and Boltt and all the things that you touch here in 2023. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It was really enjoyed the conversation, Chaz.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.